This story takes place in the fall of 2016, right in the heat of the whole killer clown thing that was going on for a while. My cousin and I were both in middle school at the time, and I was staying over at his house one night. There were quite a few people in the house that night, including us, my aunt and uncle, and my younger cousins. It will be easier to understand the story by explaining the layout of the house and yard first. They lived in a rather large double-wide trailer that they bought that was positioned on a flattened part of a hill. Their driveway is a rather steep gravel slope that connected to the road at the bottom of the hill. Behind the house and up the hill was nothing but woods. My cousin and I were the only ones still awake this night, watching TV in the living room. We kept hearing noises in the woods behind the house. We could see into the woods from the window in the living room where we were sitting, but we didn't pay much attention to the noises since it was kind of windy. Plus, my uncle had lots of motion lights outside the house. The motion lights were positioned in the back facing the woods, the side door close to the driveway on the opposite side of the house, and on the porch that overlooked the front yard and the road. Because of all the motion lights, we weren't too worried about anyone or anything being outside, since anything out there would trigger the lights. We had heard lots of stories and watched lots of YouTube videos about the whole killer clown thing that was popular at the time. Personally, I didn't think that it was real. I thought it was just prank videos. Also, we live in a small town in northeast Tennessee where everyone owned some sort of firearm, including my uncle. We were never afraid of anyone dressing up as a clown and trying anything. The only lights on in the house were the TV and the dim light up above the kitchen sink that was only a few feet behind the couch. Suddenly, the motion detector light in the backyard turned on. We noticed, but we didn't think anything of it. The lights were set on a 10-minute timer, and if it detected movement, it would stay on and turn off after 10 minutes if no other movement was detected. After 10 minutes, they went back off, so we figured that it was just an animal, which wasn't uncommon. After about 20 minutes, I went to the bathroom down the hall. I did my business and washed my hands. But when I came out of the bathroom, the motion light on the side of the house by the side door that entered into the laundry room turned on. I could see it shining through the thin blinds that were on the door. I heard what sounded like footsteps on the gravel outside, and then the doorknob started rattling quickly like somebody was trying to open it. Luckily, the blinds were shut, so whoever it was didn't see me. I ran back into the living room to tell my cousin. My cousin had heard the same thing I did, because he was already up and halfway into his dad's room to wake him up. At that point, I saw the light from the front porch come on, so I got up to look out the window that looked out to the porch, but I couldn't see anything. My uncle had quickly grabbed his pistol and a flashlight and was out on the front porch looking for whoever or whatever it was. My cousin and I were behind him on the porch watching. He looked around with the flashlight for a bit, and eventually we saw something. There at the bottom of the hill, in the ditch by the road, was someone dressed up as a clown in a cheap-looking costume. The clown was facing up the hill towards us, and it just looked at us and waved. My uncle fired a warning shot, and the clown ran across the road and into the woods. My cousin and I didn't sleep anymore that night, while my uncle stayed out on the porch for a few more hours to make sure that nobody came back. I don't doubt that it could have just been a high school kid playing a prank trying to scare whoever was in the house. After reading some more experiences with these clowns of people's lives actually being threatened and in danger, it still scares me to think of what the clown would have tried to do if he was able to get inside the house. I had an interaction with a clown once that stuck with me for a while. I live in a small village in England. On one side of our village is a vast forest that has parts that are very thick with trees, and some parts that are large clearings. I usually walked there on weekends, as it was relaxing and a calming place for me. However, I don't walk anywhere near there after what happened. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was doing my usual route through the woods when I came across many pieces of paper on the ground, all scattered in a specific area. There wasn't a breeze that day, so the pieces of paper hadn't blown off. There must have been about 50 pieces of paper, all with the same phrase on them. All the papers said, "Bringing you the laugh." I didn't really think much of it, and I took a photo of it to show my friends later. I kept on walking, And 5 minutes later, I came across another pile, all with the same phrase, bringing you the laugh, written on them. I took another picture and decided I would report it to the non-emergency number when I got home. When I looked up from taking the picture, I saw a bright flash of color in the tree line. I called out, "Hello," and "Who's there?" but I heard nothing. I thought I was seeing things, but I was cautious as I kept walking. Then, suddenly, a clown jumped out from behind a tree. He had a latex mask that covered his head and was wearing a bright yellow, purple, and red costume covered in polka dots. His mouth was revealed through a mask, and he grinned at me. I was expecting him to have crooked yellow teeth, and I was surprised when he flashed perfect, bright white ones at me. I was shocked and started out, "Who are you?" He giggled and said in a sing-song voice, "I'm Honky the Clown. I'm your best friend." He kept asking me questions about where I lived, what my name was, and if I locked my doors at night. I was annoyed and creeped out, so I told the clown firmly that it wasn't funny and to leave me alone. His demeanor changed quickly. He stopped grinning and in an upset voice repeated the words, "Not funny," over and over again. He kept repeating those words, but he got angrier every time he said it. After the 5th repetition of the words, he was practically spitting with fuming anger. He then took a kitchen knife out of his back pocket and lunged at me. I dodged out of the way, but not quite fast enough apparently. I sprinted out of there as fast as I could possibly run. I hadn't felt him cut me, but I looked at my arm while running and saw a long thin line appear on my skin, oozing blood. I was able to get away without the clown following me, and nothing happened after that. I ran out of the woods, back home, and I called the police instantly. When the police arrived, I took them to the place where the clown was, but he was gone, and so was the paper. The police investigated for a few days, asked a few questions, but were gone by Wednesday. I haven't seen the clown since, but I still look over my shoulder sometimes, as if there was a clown there, watching me, holding a knife. It was a Friday night, and my friends and I decided to hang out at the park. We were bored, and the night felt perfect for some fresh air. Around 10 p.m., we heard a car approaching. It was slow, the headlights cutting through the darkness. At first, we didn't think much of it, but then we noticed it was moving towards us. As it got closer, we could see that it was an old beat-up sedan with the windows tinted, so we couldn't see who was inside. "Probably just somebody passing through," I said, trying to shrug it off. But as soon as it got closer, the car stopped right in front of us. We looked at each other, unsure of what to do. The engine idled, and the driver's side window rolled down. Staring out the window that had just been rolled down was a clown, complete with a painted face and wild hair. He had a wide grin that looked more unsettling than friendly. "What's up, kids?" he shouted, his voice high-pitched, and he asked us if we needed a ride. We all exchanged nervous glances. Nobody said anything, and we just hoped that he would drive away. There was something off about him, his smile and the way his eyes seemed to be darting around. The clown called out to us again, saying, "Come on, don't be shy." My friend Sarah was the first one to say anything, as she whispered to us that we should leave, her voice shaking. She stood up, and we all followed her lead, backing away from the bench. "Wait, where are you going?" the clown asked, still grinning. "I'm just trying to be friendly," he said. We turned and ran towards the nearest exit of the park. I looked back once, and the clown was still sitting there, his smile now more sinister. We didn't stop running until we reached my house. Out of breath, we piled into the living room, slamming the door behind us. We tried to laugh it off, but the mood had shifted. We were all on edge, checking the windows to make sure that the clown wasn't following us. We eventually relaxed a bit and put on a movie. Hours passed, and at around 1 a.m. after the movie was over, my friends began to leave one by one. After the last one left, I locked the door and turned off the lights. I settled onto the couch, thinking I might finally get some sleep. But then I heard a faint sound outside, an engine slowly driving up the street. I walked quietly to the window and peeked through the blinds. There it was, the same old sedan from earlier, and the window rolled down with that same clown staring straight at my house. His face was illuminated by the dashboard lights, and his grin seemed wider than before. He just sat there, motionless, as if waiting for me to make a move. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself or risk being seen. I stayed away from the window, pacing in the dark. The engine continued to run, and I could hear the faint sound of some circus tune music playing. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I didn't want to look, but curiosity gnawed at me, so I moved back to the window to take a look outside. I could see the clown now tapping his fingers against the steering wheel, still wearing that disturbing grin. Suddenly, he turned his head towards my window, as if sensing I was watching. My heart stopped, and I ducked down quickly, wondering if he had seen me. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the car door slam. I held my breath, waiting for the sound of footsteps, but instead, I heard the engine rev and the car speed off into the night. That image of the car and clown inside scared me for a while, and for the next couple weeks I was paranoid, always checking around me if it was nearby, especially at night. This isn't a story about a direct interaction with a clown, but it still freaks me out, especially since we still live in the same house with our family. It started on a Saturday morning. I was getting coffee when I noticed something strange in the living room. A clown costume laid crumpled on the floor. I glanced at my wife, who was busy with our 2 kids. Pointing to the costume, I asked my wife what the deal with the clown costume was and if the kids brought it home from somewhere. She looked over, her face scrunched up in confusion. She said she had never seen it before and the kids had not brought it home. I tossed it in the trash can, hoping it was just a prank from a neighbor that we would hear about from them over dinner later or something. We enjoyed the rest of our weekend and didn't think about the costume much. We hadn't heard anything from our neighbors and figured that the explanation for the costume being there would turn up at some point. By Tuesday, I had almost forgotten about it. I was the first one home that day, as the wife and kids were still at work and school. As I pulled into the driveway, I couldn't believe what I saw. There, hanging from a low branch of our oak tree, was the clown costume. I went over and examined the costume, and it appeared to be the same one that I had thrown away on Saturday. The trash had already been emptied, so I couldn't check to see if somebody had been through our trash and tore the bag open. That night, I called the neighbors nearby that we were good friends with, and asked about the costume and if they were pranking us. All the neighbors were confused and swore to me that they had nothing to do with it. I didn't want to freak out my wife and kids, so I decided not to tell them about the reappearance of the costume, and this time I disposed of it at my work dumpster the next day. I was a bit concerned that somebody we didn't know had placed the costume inside our house and had been through our trash to retrieve it. I don't know why anybody would pull such an elaborate prank like this just to scare us. From that point on, though, I was a lot more careful about having the door locked at all times, even when we were home, and watching out for anybody who seemed to be snooping around our property. It was late September 2016, and the supposed killer clown sightings were all over social media. I didn't think much of it until one Saturday night when I decided to go for a walk. I lived in a quiet suburb, and the streets were usually empty after dark. The sun had just set, and a cool breeze was starting to blow. I grabbed my headphones and began walking. I turned down a side street that led to a small park. The moon was out, and the path was lit by scattered streetlights. I remember thinking how peaceful it was, but then I saw something out of the corner of my eye. At the edge of the park, near the playground, a figure stood still. My heart dropped when I realized it was a clown. At first, I thought it was somebody playing a prank. The clown was dressed in a bright costume with exaggerated features painted on its face. It didn't move, and it just stared at me. I pulled my headphones out to make sure the clown wasn't saying anything. I should have turned back right then, but I was too curious. I took a few hesitant steps towards the park, and the clown remained motionless. I still wasn't even sure if it was a real person. I wanted to get closer to see if it was a cutout or a statue of some sort. As I approached a bit closer, the clown suddenly turned and ran deeper into the park. I should have turned back and gone home, but I felt an overwhelming urge to follow. As I got closer, I saw the clown stop near the swings. It started to sway back and forth, its movements erratic. I called out, "Hey, is everything okay?" The clown turned their face, obscured by shadow. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then it took a step towards me. I instinctively stepped back, and that's when I noticed something glinting in its hand. It looked like a knife. I didn't look back as I sprinted down the path. I could hear the rustle of leaves and the sound of footsteps chasing behind me. I raced through the neighborhood, desperate to lose the clown and get home. I'm not exactly sure when, but somehow I had separated myself from the clown, or maybe they had just given up. I'm very grateful that I was in pretty good shape, and I was able to outrun the clown. Or maybe the clown was in really bad shape. Who knows? But as I approached my front door, I turned to look back and make sure the clown wasn't anywhere behind me. It wasn't, and I rushed inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. My heart raced as I glanced out the window, and it was reassuring to see that the street was still empty. I wanted to believe that it was just a prank, but as I laid in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something horrible.